Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L just setting up here, making sure I got the stuff here. Hey everyone, I know it's been a bit. It's been a rough August. It's going to be a rough September. I don't see my schedule becoming nicer to me until October, so apologies. Everything is delayed for me, but hey, I hope you're well. I'm doing okay. Let's get into it. Chapter 399 of Hero Academia. Chapter 400 is coming out today. Well, sorry, not today. Chapter 400 Spoilers is coming out today, and I'm excited. Well, fingers crossed. Hopefully they come out today. I'm excited. We'll see what happens. Let's talk about 399, though. So this chapter, when I'm looking at it, I think there is a great opportunity to talk about some really interesting stuff. There's a very unique problem that's occurring in the chapter. And when I say problem, I really mean a challenge. Not really a problem. This is just, again, nature of the beast, but it's great because when we're at the end of the manga, it's always when these interesting little situations come out, and because of who Horikoshi is, we're in for a real treat here. But overall, the chapter, what you end up getting in it, All Might versus All for One, we see more of the upgrades in the suit. Then we have the very aggressive cut to Aoyama. We skip the majority of the battlefield, and that makes sense that you want to skip the majority of the battlefield because Horikoshi does not want to be caught fleshing out all these battlefields till the end of time. Fair enough. He's got to kind of expedite things. We see the Aoyama battlefield. We find out where Toru is. We have Kuniera going down. Now we just need to get the situation with Gashly under control and get Sero done. Don't know how that's going to be worked into all this, but maybe it'll come up in the next two chapters, maybe not. And then we go back to the All Might fight just to coincide with Aoyama. One thing that you'll realize with the All Might fight is that it's just like a symbolic gesture. It's not anything that's like significant or like really like the author's doing a lot. The author's doing a lot, but when you look behind the symbolic gesture, you just see like, okay, like this isn't like the most perfect thing in the world, but the timing of how you brought it together, like it worked. It worked. He's got really compromised parts, but he's putting things together. He's making something work out of it. Okay, cool. I'm trying to go quickly because I don't want to take too much of your time here, and I also have like the stream later, and I don't want to waste too much time. So, what we're going to talk about here, the way we're going to start this one off, I'm going to go and talk to you about the unique situation that unfolds specifically with the All Might All for One fight. Alright, so check this out. Can you guys see that actually? Yeah, I've written this little thing up for you just so you can have it here so we can talk about it. That chapter 499, we got like a pretty good moment. If we have like a graph, right? Chapter 499, there's no way about it. Like, that's definitely a rise. That's a really good moment. You can really see it in the build up. Like, you have All Might there. He's talking about, yo, I got this idea. It's going to be a really good one. Like, take All for One out also, because this is going to be the title of the video. The amount of times that All Might has killed All for One. Like, All for One is extremely lucky that he has this cheat level power. Because this man is careless. Like, if I was All for One, and I know the fragility of my being, I'm not gonna let some idiots, like, just keep, getting kill shots on me. That doesn't look good. Because, like, I'm still, like, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all. It's just careless. Like, the guy should level up a little bit. Anyway, not the point. The build-up of the chapter really makes it feel like, okay, you see that finale and it's like, shit, that was a high moment, right? And what I'm drawing here on the side is just, this is called rising action. If you ever look up like different styles of plot, you'll usually find graphs that depict the general outline of the energy in a plot. I might be using like weird words to describe it, and apologies, but believe me, there are plot structure outlines or like graphs to give you the idea of like how story formats like rags to riches or tragedy maybe work out. Anyway, point is, we got like a bit of rising action here. Now, the reason I'm drawing this is because there's something that's going on with the rest of this thing. And so we have what I've written up here. Apologies if I forget anything here. These are the plot elements and the threads going into the All for One All Might fight, and also other threads that might be going into it. So just to very quickly go through it here, you guys will probably agree with the majority of it. We have the All for One versus All Might history going into it. We have the All Might prophecy going into it. We have All Might and Class 1A's relationship, and not Class 1B. Class 1B is not included in this, but only Class 1A. The All Might and Class 1A relationship, and we have now in this chapter Aoyama's answer. After that, the ones that I'm imagining we're still going to get, Izuku and All Might, Bakugo and All Might, Stain and All Might, with the special note that All Might and Class 1A's relationship has not been fully demonstrated in the chapter. So, what that ultimately means is that All For One is a character who many other characters have answers to. Many other characters have inputs going into this fight through All For One, and because of All Might's stubbornness, we have many other characters having inputs thanks to All Might being involved in the fight. What this causes is that there are a lot of things that need to be answered in this fight. Now, when you look at the Aoyama stuff was an answer. In any other situation, this one big moment where you like bring out the worth of this kid that you like, that the enemy had abused and taken advantage of, and you use it as a comeuppance to get one over the final villain. In any other fight, that would be a great climax. That would be a great finale. We would be done, but we can't be done because there's so many other things to do. So what you end up having here is, because there's so much to answer, this finale, it can't just be rising action. What can happen here, maybe we like plateau and then we continue rising, but what's more likely to happen is like, since Horikoshi, it's probably a rise and then a dip, because Horikoshi likes to roller coaster, because he likes making these highs feel high. Like he wants to give you a bigger feeling of elation, so he does that by doing a roller coaster effect. But the problem with the roller coaster is that this just gets kind of tiring, and this is like the other problem with having all these plot elements and threads, because you know that they're going to still come. It just expands the fight, and it just gets kind of tiring. But again, if you were doing this in a novel, a common criticism would be that it's drawn out because you just won't let the guy die. And when you look at it, like Horikoshi set up a situation where All For One is the ultimate villain, in the case that you can kill him as many times as you want, and he's going to keep coming back until you're expanded all your rhetorical bullets. Until the rhetorical bullets are out of the gun, you're going to keep doing it. You're going to like launch all your rhetoric. And the reason that happens is because Horikoshi does not like cutting shit. Well, he does cut shit, but when he cuts it, he repurposes it for later. For instance, Mr. Compress. What happens with Mr. Compress? You know, we find out that there's this one guy through Gentle. We have all a villain arc, which looked like it was going to give a lot of the villains a good amount of time. But we only really got good development on Toga and Twice, and of course Shigaraki, because he's the main person on the villains. And then Spinner and Mr. Compress kind of fall to the side. And then when you actually finally have it, like, okay, I have to tell people why Mr. Compress is the way he is, he just shoves it in there at a really dumb little moment. Not a dumb moment, but you know, it's a very fast moment. Point is that Horikoshi's style is to take stuff he didn't use at one point and use it for later. The problem now is there is no longer a later. Now we have to do everything because the manga's ending. And that's why when you have the All For One versus All Might fight, all those elements that All For One is the only person that can answer them, they all have to happen here. So we go back to just a very quick plot diagram. We have Aoyama's rising action. Now, what's probably going to happen, we need to get the Izuku moment. We need to get like Izuku and All Might's relationship being re-demonstrated until we see the name Deku. Until we see the name Deku, I think there's an Izuku moment coming. Then we have Bakugo. Bakugo might be represented in a canon that's on All Might right now. We have the missing kids like Mineta and Momo. So what's going to happen here? Well, with Horikoshi's patterns, we're probably going to go into a little bit of a dip. All Might's going to again be in a bad position. We're going to go through the repetitive motion of like, oh my god, All For One is even younger now. Let's do it again. Woo. Let's do it again. And then we get like maybe a higher, more tension moment. So we do another little rise. We dip again. We do another little rise. And it'll just continue on like that. Now, mind you, this little story structure you see here. Oh, oops. Sorry, guys. There we go. This little story structure you see here, this actually is used a lot. You can use it in the 3-act structure. It's just constant rising action. Like it's pretty much you gain something, you lose a little bit, but then you gain more. The thing is, like, this goes over the course of an entire story, not over the same scene with repetitive story beats. So when you're looking at this, like one of the challenges is that you could run into audience fatigue, where people just get fatigued from seeing like finales. They're cool little moments, but a little bit is diminished when you know that more things are coming, and because of who's involved in the other things. But the anticipation of a bigger moment's ultimately going to diminish it, is what ends up happening. When you're in this kind of situation where Horikoshi's in, it becomes a very intellectual thought process you have to go through, where you're like, okay, like, I can understand why things are happening the way they are. Like, I get it. All for One is very stubborn. Like, there's a condition to be able to kill him. Like, you have to like kill him like 3 times before you actually get to the end of it. Like, I get it, you know, but feelings and the thought process are very different. Someone's feeling of excitement versus logical reason as to why they have to like put up with the repetitive motion. You know, this is something that all authors kind of have to contend with. And generally, repeating sequences isn't fun, because this is just going through the motions at some point, with the different flavoring being, in this case, like All Might's relationship with Bakugo, All Might's relationship with Izuku, especially on the Stain and All Might thing. The Stain and All Might thing might not happen, because like that I feel like that's something easy to sacrifice. Like, Stain might even show up after All Might's been taken down, for example, right? Like, will Stain show up during the moment? Don't know, but like, Stain's set up to go help All Might. Regardless, when I see this thing, you know, I see it from the perspective of like writing books, where like you have so many elements and you want to address them in the final fight, and this just turns into a situation where there's just too much bloat. There's just too many elements to address in the final fight. How do you beat this? In a book, readers tend to be a lot more aggressive, because like, if you're the kind of person that reads literature, you have a kind of different mindset than a manga reader. But they tend to be more aggressive about this kind of stuff, because books in general are more better planned than a week-to-week manga series that is at the whims of weekly input. So, you know, that's why that ends up happening. For a book, you would not be doing what Horikoshi is doing. For a book, you would be, all these little peaks, you would be like mixing them throughout the course of the book. You would figure out a way to get all your elements happening throughout the book, and then you would have like the proper rising action sequence happening in such a way that, like, the action builds up over the course of, like, say 400 pages instead of over the course of 4 chapters of pictures. Some people also do this like across the entire series, or like across the entire arc of a series, but you know, point is, Horikoshi's in a really tough spot, and ultimately a lot of this is happening because he wants to get all his elements answered, and like, that's the kind of writer he is. One thing I will say is that what you're ultimately going to see is just more clumsy execution. Clumsy execution and Horikoshi right now, I think, are synonymous. Just with the way that he handled like the mutant shape stuff, like, you can kind of see what I mean by clumsy execution. It's just like, some things aren't going to fit perfectly, and ultimately, in this case, the reason why things don't fit perfectly is just because you have so many responsibilities here. Again, you know, the motto for me has been, I am not jealous of this man. He is doing his best, and again, he does more than the average author on Shonen Jump does, so to some degree also appreciate him. For you readers, what does this matter for you? What does all this mean for you? Nothing at all. It only means something if you ever want to try like writing a book, just because like, you would not be copying Horikoshi's style here. It's just too much. It's just too much bloat. Like, it's just like, you're like, if you're just starting off, you would more likely lose people than you would gain people on this one. Anyway, I really enjoyed talking about that. I do love talking about like more book writing theory. Anyway, we're going to go into My Hero Academia. It's chapter 399, Organic Mingling Clusters of Light, which I think is much better than the Fanscan translation. Alright, 399. So we start off the chapter, we see damage depiction, not really that big of a deal. We just have like All Might setting up what he's going to use. We have Tailman, Tentacle, and Froppy. Okay, so you know, this is the part where like, it's easy to see how shit a lot of these quirks are. Because, you know, you have Tailman here, right? But really, what's the difference between a tail and a tentacle? Just change out the headpiece and it'd be fine. There's no real difference here. A tail and a tentacle are the same when you're using a robotic suit. Such that, you know, it could, like, what makes Ojiro special isn't his tail. It's the fact that he comes from a dojo family, the fact that he actually knows some form of martial arts, and the fact that this kid was so competent he could run hit and run operations on over a dozen villains the first time he came into conflict with villains. That's what makes Ojiro special. So it's really funny when it comes to the quirks. It's like Tentacle can do all of the stuff that Ojiro can, and probably better. We have the Froppy suction cups, bro. The funny thing again is like, okay, pretty cool, pretty cool. You need to get inspiration from somewhere. I kind of wish you had used like something else, like maybe poison. Wait, Mina does that. Maybe like the tongue, the like her tongue going crazy. Oh, but wait, Sero already does that. Just because like with the suction cups, again, Shoji could just make multiple little fingers to grab things. Mind you, it'd be hard to break into the cement, so I'll give it to her there. I'll give it to her. Like, that's actually a very unique function. But I'm pretty sure Shoji and Tentacle could probably figure out some way to mimic Suyu's suction cups. Oh, you know what? I just thought about like him making a mouth and the mouth sucking the air and like just, you know, sticking by suction force on that. That'd be pretty funny. Anyway, you know, just a thought. Point is, like, Shoji in particular has a very flexible quirk, but the one that it really affects the most is Tailman. Anyway, here we see the Shoto cannon, which when I initially saw this, I was like, pretty neat. And again, it reminds you that these things are largely just, you know, they're just symbolic gestures about the kids. They're like very shoddy imitations. Okay, we go into page 2. So what I see in page 2 that was very cool is that you have, alright, the birds based off of Coda. They're pretty much just there to, they're just drones to go get him things in the shape of birds. Like, I love that that is what Coda is reduced to, just the man that talks to birds. But the bigger thing here is that, again, we have the reiteration of the massive damage to his body shortens his lifespan. I feel really bad for Horikoshi because it kind of feels like he thinks he needs to reiterate this every now and again, right? Because I know we did this last week, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but I know we did this last week. Anyway, All Might pretty much says, I know how to blast this guy up. We have All For One going after All Might. We have a pretty good assault from All For One on page 3. But there's not really anything of value in page 3 other than finding out we're in Power Saver mode and just good art. On page 4, we just get this wonderful shot. I love it. And we just have really good banter from All For One and All Might. I like that All Might's calling him a liar and that he's not, like, this guy's not conserving power. So page 4, I'm looking at it. It doesn't really give you any good information other than cool art. Again, this is one of those things where the anime is probably going to be really good. Now, what I like on page 5 is just the vocabulary. Now, you guys tell me, how many of you like actually know what simulacrums means? And sorry, I can't pronounce that one, but I've seen it. I read it all the time in D&D. But it was cool to see such a high-level word there. Anyway, we see the tentacle pieces being broken apart. It's just like All Might's getting weaker and weaker pretty much. Nothing really great here. Actually, All For One again had another great moment where he calls it symbol of impotence. I love that. Like, All For One's vocabulary game definitely really high here. Alright, we move on to page 6, and we have All For One having a great face as he tears out of a wall. This kind of reminds me of one of the guys from the Baki manga series, Snack, I think it was. Like, he had like a similar kind of eye design. It was a really funny shot. And we have this not so funny shot where All Might pretty much should have been cut in half, I think, if All For One was actually serious here. We move on to page 7. We get the little metaphor. Last time we saw the guy in, like, well, the naked guy in the storm metaphor. It was All Might talking about the one for all flame, like, woo. We have here All Might's kill attempt number 20. It might not be kill attempt number 20. It might be higher than that. Like, bro, look, this is pretty metal. Like, holy moly, bud. Look at that guy. Look at that. That was amazing. Is that the right hand? Yeah, I think that's the right hand. Yeah, I think that's the right hand. So I love that Tailman's quirk got to get a moment here, even though it looks exactly like the tentacle, whatever. And we have, like, All Might flat out, like, shove that thing in there. Like, he had to rip skin. He broke that man's jaw, and he blasted. Now, the way that the nose is here, it does look like he blasted out a cheek. Doesn't matter. That guy's throat's eviscerated, like just from the sheer heat. That throat's not going to be working anymore. All for One has died so many times. Anyway, on the bottom of page 7, we have a return to like passing on the torch, that kind of metaphor. So we just have, again, really good consistency with All Might and what he is. So again, the author's really good on being consistent with character rhetoric. At that point, worth pointing out that, again, if there's one thing you have to always celebrate Horikoshi for, it's his ability to stick with dialogue patterns for his characters. Okay, so we move on and we do the really harsh transition over to Kuniera. It's a pretty good scene. Again, the art is really on point. We have a thing about like there's no need for light, and we have the very quick narration. Oh, and it's actually really cool to see that Aoyama was releasing little laser blasts the whole time. Anyway, so one thing I want to show you here is how the author might force like subtle expectations. And what I mean by that is that you find out that everyone was wiped out. Like, it's really unfortunate that all these pro heroes really get wiped out to the point that they're relying on people who only have 1 year of experience. It's really unfortunate that we're here, but hey, it's a child empowerment manga. That's okay. And in this world, like, type advantage really matters a lot. And I guess stealth. Like, sneak attacks are really powerful in Hero Academia. Anyway, we have 32 heroes tasked with mopping up the villains. And we find out only one of them was still standing. Now, you'll realize the problem there, because when you know Toru's coming, it's like, well, no. It's not just one standing. 2 of them are actually still standing. And so, like, you have a little bit of unreliable narrator. If you wanted to defend the narrator, what you would say is that, oh, Toru wasn't actually tasked with mopping up the villains who weren't warped away. Toru was tasked with supporting Aoyama in his endeavor to mop up the 32 who weren't warped away. Like, yeah, play semantics if you want. You definitely make a good lawyer. Anyway, jokes aside, it's just like, that's a... I think that's a little bit of like, whenever you have to rely on technical truths, it's a little bit of a deceptive practice. Like, you know what you're doing. You're trying to lull people into a false sense of security. It's like, whatever, though, because like in Hero Academia, I don't believe the narrator anyway. Like, the narrator has actually never said... Like, the narrator has more instances of being wrong or lying than they have... Or, like, exaggerating than they have of being right. Anyway, Kuniera. We find out Kuniera is a corpse collector. Makes sense. I actually really like the quirk depiction. I like the idea of them sapping nutrients from the flesh that they're growing in. I love the very nice little bit that Horikoshi added in here of the power interaction between Fat Gum and the Thing. I feel bad that Fat Gum doesn't get to do anything at all. I feel bad that he gets fully neutralized, but whatever. We don't have time to cover it. We get this whole thing about how they spread. One of the things that I really start wondering is, like, I wonder how Mushroom Girl would have done against this. Because it would have been pretty much mushrooms parasitizing on top of parasitic flowers. I would have been very interesting to see how the mushrooms would have played together with this one. But whatever. It's a cool quirk, all things considered. So, on page 10, we just get the giant thing that villains usually do of trying to break down the main guy, in this case, Aoyama. The best part of his dialogue is definitely this part right here. Imagine that, hoping to fit in, you became his pawn and accepted a power suit that was ill-suited for your physiology. To put it bluntly, you've led a pathetic, shameful life. On this part, I just want to, like, very quickly point out, I don't think they would have known that it was ill-suited to his physiology, other than he's quirkless. Like, if you give it to a quirkless person, like, to what degree... How do you know if it's going to be ill-suited? Like, you don't... Point is, it makes sense of a taunt, but it doesn't make sense if you go in deeper, just because, like, every quirkless person that gets a power would be ill-suited to it, unless the quirk came in with a lot of safety mechanisms. Like, yeah, whatever. You understand what was going on here. Kuniera is just messing with Aoyama. We then get into Aoyama's little motivational speech here, of him just being reminded of how shamefully he lived. Now, I do want to defend Aoyama here. Like, Aoyama, you're a child pressured by your parents being pressured. Like, your parents were going to be put in a position where they could be killed. Yeah, no, man. Like, Aoyama had the deck stacked against him. Like, unless you have a very strong rebellious personality or a very strong independent personality from being a kid, you're not going to be very good in this situation. Like, so... One of the unfortunate things here is that, yeah, you're reminded that you were living shamefully, but, like, this is like being at the bottom of a well during the night. You're looking all around, and even if you look up, you're not gonna see the light because you're looking up at the wrong time, or like you're stuck in your night, right? There was nothing the guy could do in this position, and like again, you're going up against the man that survived All Might. Like, the reality is, there are more people like Aoyama in the world than there are people like Izuku and All Might. That's just the sad reality of the situation. Mind you, when Aoyama does like step up and he does take that step forward, it becomes even bigger because for him it's like he's going from like negative 100 to like 5, right? That's a giant leap. Regardless, this was a good moment. Okay, so we have Toru showing up here, and we have some pretty good juxtapositions on this page 1213. We have All Might saying, "Let there be light in the darkness," and that's timed together with his whole thing of bringing in Hercules so he is able to use his satellite cannon. And honestly, props to him for having a satellite cannon. With Toru's involvement, we really see a return to that moment that we saw them come back from one of their internships where we could see that she could refract Aoyama's light. So it was cool to see it here, pretty much a redirection attack. You got a direct hit. Kuneta, unfortunately, does not have the HP to be able to tank a hit from Aoyama in general. Aoyama seems to get hit by it, but it's fine because that's Aoyama. We, of course, have the satellite cannon over here by Can't Stop Twinkling. So I do like this because, you know, at the end of the day, like, I think we can all agree that a laser cannon is probably stronger than naval laser, just because, like, that's quite a lot. That explosion went higher than buildings, bro. That's fully concussive force. That thing broke. Like, there are stones that are flying above buildings. Like, that thing went so hard. Anyway, point is though, like, when you're in a situation, you're a teacher, a poor kid's been, sorry, I had deja vu. Like, I feel like I've looked at this building hundreds of times. Like this one specifically with the broken window. I wonder if that's a copy paste. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Sorry. I think I know what chapter it's in too. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Like, look, if you're All Might, 100%, you're gonna be petty and you're gonna hit All for One with the power of the guy he screwed over the most, that being Aoyama, or the power of the child he manipulated the most. It's just good. What's it called? Poetic justice, right? But yeah. We get there, we have Can't Stop Twinkling making its attack. I do kind of like wonder about how that all came together, but at the end of the day, we still have a few more quirks. How did All Might survive that? Because he was pinned. He probably used some Toru related quirk, maybe a Creati related quirk, who knows. But we still have to see Mineta's quirk, we still have a few to go. We still have to see Bakugo. What's going to happen next? I don't know, man. I don't know. I got visions of what I think is going to happen next, but I've already talked about them last week. Yeah, I'm hoping for a Bakugo cannon. I'm hoping for a moment where All Might runs towards danger, exactly like Izuku did at the beginning of the series, unarmed and just trying to be a good person. Hope to see Stain pop up. We'll have to see what happens in Chapter 400. Cool that we're here, though. Do I have anything else to add for the chapter? I don't think so, not really. Overall, solid chapter for me. Love seeing it and can't wait to get more. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day, and it's great that All Might had a satellite laser cannon, man. Like, oof, man, imagine if he came stocked with Class 1B level quirks. Also, this, like, again, like, All Might's armor set beats the majority of Hero Academia universe.